name is Donna Zedler, and I'm recording this video for my U.S. History 375 course. My professor is Robert Ritchie, and I'm interviewing my husband's uncle, Bob Schwalbe, about his service in the Vietnam War. Hello, Uncle Bob.
Hello.
We're live.
Alrighty.
Very good. Well, let's start at the beginning. How old were you when you arrived in Vietnam, and how did you end up going there?
Well, I certainly didn't swim.
Yes.
I was 20 years old when I went over. I was in the Air Force, and I got my orders to go to Vietnam.
So were you already in the Air Force?
Oh,
What
yeah.
year was
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I knew I was going to be drafted, so I joined the Air Force instead.
Wow. Okay. And they were how did the draft work? I mean, how were they doing that? I'm really not familiar.
Anybody and everybody everybody got a draft card.
Wow.
And basically, you could get an exemption if you were in college. And at that point, if you were holding a B average, you would be exempt from military duty.
Wow.
Otherwise, pretty much everybody got drafted. Everybody.
Okay.
So
you joined the Air Force, and
right. So I wouldn't have to be drafted. Yes.
okay. And what was your position? What were you doing at that point?
I was security.
Security. Okay. What was your role in the conflict in Vietnam?
Staying
What did you
alive.
have? Yeah, I'm sure. So were you doing security as well at that
Yeah.
point?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I was a forward observer is what it was called
yeah.
in the Air Force, and I worked up on the other side of the wire, basically.
Okay.
Off the base, I would be if there was any snipers, any attacks coming in,
Wow.
I would be the first defense, I guess you'd say.
Wow. What did a day look like for you? Were you out 12 hours at a time? Were you out a day?
Yeah, 12 to 14 at night.
Okay, and then you would go back to base afterward.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just a little bit off of base, so it wasn't miles out or anything like the Army, but it was, we called it outside the fence.
And were you patrolling in a plane?
Yeah. In a plane? No.
No.
I was on the ground.
You were on the ground.
I was in a Jeep and in foxholes.
Wow. Wow, that's really harrowing. Wow. I'm going to skip over the next question because we just answered that. Can you give me some recollections of your experience? What you experienced when you were in the war? What you were doing?
That's a hard question to answer because it's a recollection of my experiences.
Yeah. I mean, what was it like? What was your work like? What were your days like?
My days were sleeping. My nights were being out.
Nights, yeah.
And occasionally getting shot at and
Wow.
ducking bullets.
Wow.
And going on the perimeter, we had several guard posts, and I would, if anyone was getting hit with fire, I would go to help them out. I was a backup, quick response, is what it would be called. So
Wow.
that was not a normal night by any means, but it did happen. Other nights, it was just quiet.
Yeah.
And I would watch the bombing smoke going up far away on mountainsides and whatnot.
Were you stationed in more than one place?
Yeah.
And where were those places?
And Nha Trang was the first one, and then I was out on an island in the ocean.
Really?
A big island. Yeah, there was a radar site, or actually air traffic control type thing for Vietnam, for the planes, and that was on the top of a mountain. It was about 1 square block, I guess you'd say, and we had to keep the place secure for all the air traffic controllers.
Yeah.
So we'd be out, on the fence, on the line, all night long. So
wow. Protecting everybody so that they could do their job.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Did you have any experiences with the Vietnamese people themselves? Were you able to get out among
Oh yeah,
people?
oh yeah.
And what was that
Sure.
like? What was their culture like to you as a 20-year-old person?
The culture was pretty darn poor, pretty darn different, unusual, unsanitary. They didn't really care about life because the Vietnamese people had been in war since, if you're doing history classes, you'd know, since the 30s, 40s, and whatnot,
Yeah.
50s, first the French. So all they knew was war, and all they basically knew was people getting killed.
Wow.
And their thing was to stay alive, and they just sort of, life did not mean much to the Vietnamese people.
Wow.
They kind of lived day to day. That was their thing. If, the little boys learned how to steal, they learned how to take advantage of GIs. The girls did whatever they had to do. They'd work in bars. They became prostitutes. That was prevalent.
Wow.
A lot of the bars had back rooms or upstairs.
Wow.
So a lot of them became prostitutes
Right.
just to survive.
Just a really hard scrabble existence for them.
Oh, absolutely. Now, of course, there was the other side. There were always some, that I didn't have much contact with them.
Yeah.
Other Vietnamese I had contact with were we'd call them mama sans.
Yeah.
And they'd come on base. They were allowed on base every day. And they would do, basic housekeeping. They'd wash clothes for us. We'd give them $1 a week or whatever it was. It was cheap.
Wow. Wow.
And,
What was their feeling about the soldiers? Did they even express a difference from what they had experienced previously? I mean, was there
What do you mean?
Well, like you had said, and like I've studied as well, they had been colonized and there had been so much war in their nation. Were they glad to see the U.S. soldiers?
Hell no. They hated us.
Really?
Sure, they hated us. They hated war. They hated the Americans. For the most part, Donna, the American GIs were jerks. Okay, they felt superior. The all-American boy was somebody who felt superior to anybody, and they would call the Vietnamese people foreigners.
Wow.
Now go figure.
Yeah,
we're in their country and they're being called foreigners. They were treated like garbage by a lot of the GIs. The first thing I learned when I got over there was how to say please and thank you in Vietnamese. A lot of guys didn't.
Yeah, it didn't matter to them so much.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And, a lot of them, there were a lot of nice people, of course, but it's like anywhere. You can find that anywhere in the world.
Yeah, if you reach out enough to people, you can find people. So your brother Jim was also in Vietnam. Were you there at the same time?
No, they didn't allow that. The government had a rule, basically, which people did get around, but they never wanted two brothers in country at the same time.
Okay.
So, and that was because if you were the only two brothers in the family, they always... the rules were if you were the only son, you would not go to Vietnam, okay? Because the government, in their infinite wisdom, figured that they would never take somebody's only male child away so that they couldn't carry on their family name or something.
Wow.
So, like I say, like everything, there's ways to get around it, but for the most part, only one person in the family could go there. So when Jim got back, I went.
Wow.
I was, I was told I was going. So.
Wow, and he was also in the Air Force?
Oh yeah.
And what was his job? What was he doing?
Well, he was on a flight crew on a cargo plane, and in Vietnam, he didn't really stay in or live in Vietnam. Most flight crew people did not. They would live, Jim was in the Philippine Islands, some 700 miles away, and he would fly in country is what we called it. He'd come in country for about 2 to 3 weeks at a time, I guess. In which case, his job on the cargo plane was to move cargo to you've seen pictures of jeeps and whatnot being pulled out of flying aircraft with parachutes.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that was him.
Wow.
rigging the parachutes, pushing the jeeps out, food, supplies, ammunition.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
the troops. What ultimately killed Jim was the fact that he was also moving around a lot of chemicals. The bad chemicals, the Agent Orange, which was a defoliant, and he'd move that around in big, 50-gallon barrels and whatnot, and he was in contact with a lot of that, and the military, the United States, and there are several ailments that we who have been in Vietnam, they cannot prove that it did not happen because of our being over there,
Right.
because they used a lot of chemicals, a lot of defoliants and whatnot. So Jim had ALS, and the military, the government, the Veterans Association took care of him real well.
Yeah.
Because he was around chemicals. Several things. If I were to get diabetes as an example, I would be covered, because they've never been able to prove that diabetes, it cannot be caused by some of the chemicals that were used over there.
Right.
And there's a big list of ailments, of some are deadly, some are not. Jim lost a good buddy. I lost a buddy from Agent Orange, where that was a terrible chemical, and anybody that breathed that in or had a lot of contact with it, you die of something. It's just a matter of time.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And some things longer than
I was
others.
lucky. I would sit on barrels of the defoliant.
Wow.
I didn't know what the stuff was. I'd sit on the barrels smoking cigarettes and whatnot. So,
Wow.
I mean, crazy things happened. Crazy things went on.
Yeah, you were young
It
guys,
was
too.
a non-existence, is what it was, Donna. We all had this crazy idea. We just wanted to get back home alive. Every one of us knew we were not going to make it. So everybody you talked to, we would never talk about it, but there was just this feeling that I'm never going to make it out of here alive.
Wow.
So,
I'm so sorry.
and indeed, 2 weeks before I rotated back to the United States, I had an example where, like I said, I was off base, and right before sunup every morning, there was a railroad that the United States had built from, base to base and whatnot around country. And that would come on base, sometime throughout the day. At night, of course, no trains ever traveled at night. So at night, I would put out flares, trip flares, and trip grenades, we call them. I'd rig those across the railroad tracks in several spots. So if any zappers or any bad boys would try to sneak in there to get on base, they would either be blown up or they'd light up the flares. I would also collect, back then we ate C rations. Now they've got MRIs, which is meals that are ready to eat. We had the old C rations, and they were in boxes. In fact, they were leftovers from World War II.
Right.
So they lasted that long.
Yeah.
But, a lot of guys didn't want them, didn't eat them at night. So I'd go around when I could, and I'd collect all the uneaten food. And there was this little girl that would meet me outside of the base as I was around the area where I was taking the flares down on the railroad tracks. she would meet me. There was a village, a few hundred meters away from that, a small village. And she would come over, and I would give her the box of this, as many of the sea rations as I could collect from the other guys. And she would take that back to her village, and it would help them eat.
Yeah.
And every night she'd meet me. One night, and this was like I say a couple of weeks before I was rotating back to the United States. And like I said earlier, Donna, we all knew we weren't going to make it back. We just, we figured it's just a matter of time. And one gets even more scared when you're getting short, when you're getting ready to come back to.
Yeah.
You get real scared because that's when you become paranoid. And over cautious and everything, and real scared. And I made it this far. I'm gonna,
Right.
One night she stayed about 50 yards away from me, long ways away, and she started hollering. I said, "Come here. What's wrong with you? Come on over." Ladi Mao is the word for come here, and she said, "No, Didi Mao. And that means no, go away, go.
No.
That's what Didi Mao is,
No.
a rough translation. And I said, what's wrong? What's the matter? Didi Mao, VC, she hollered at me. And suddenly, because of that, they opened fire. They were out to get me. So, it was a true thing that I almost didn't make it back. But I jumped in the Jeep. I hightailed it. I had a couple guys with me. We had a machine gun mounted on the back on the Jeep, and all our weapons and everything. So we got back on base, and we opened fire on that village a little bit. But we didn't blow it away or anything.
So you think that the Viet Cong had surrounded the village to try to ambush you?
Oh, they were in the village. They were in it.
Oh,
they were shooting from the huts and from the, we know where the bullets were coming from.
Wow.
I have no idea if this little girl got killed in the meantime or not. I'll never know.
And there you were doing a humanitarian thing.
What's that?
You were doing a humanitarian thing, and it just
didn't,
it didn't.
I was doing what I do. You don't call it human. I'll help anybody I can.
It was a beautiful thing to do, to try to help.
It was me. It was just me, Donna.
Well, that's a good thing, Mr. Bob.
But that was the beginning of a change for me to start seeing things a little bit differently in life, and not really a good way in life. It tainted me definitely. Maybe not trust things and people, and it just kind of changes things. So.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my questions. Was what sort of life lessons did you take away from your time?
Well, I'm currently involved with the VA, and I go to a local clinic. I do have PTSD, which post-traumatic stress
disorder. Yeah.
I do have that, and I go to counseling weekly, and we have group meetings too. So I just started that within the last year or two, so I've gone through 50 years of not being there, and that's the case with the other guys that I'm there with. Things just start coming up. A lot of my friends had just horrendous. They were out in the bush. I wasn't.
Right.
I had a rack. I had a bunk to go back to during the day to sleep. They would just lay down in the mud in the
Yeah, cold and wet and all of it.
Yeah. So they had it a lot worse. And again, that's why I joined the Air Force, so I wouldn't be one of them.
Sure.
So another thing that happens to all of us in one respect or another is called survivor's guilt. What that means is, in my case, I've carried around a guilt my entire life that I should have been with my buddies. I should have been with them out there instead of having this bed to go to during the day.
Right. Being attached to your base. Yeah.
They were getting shot at and whatnot. There was this guilt feeling that I wasn't. Other guys, a good friend of mine, Warren, he was a paratrooper, and there were very few real. There was not much parachuting going on in Vietnam, but he was with sort of an elite group that was sent in when they could not get surrounded in the enemy, and so they dropped him and all of his guys in the worst of the worst, and he's got it bad. He's had 2 breakdowns now, but he too has survivor's guilt because a lot of his buddies, a lot of his platoon got wiped out in one big bad ambush. So,
oh boy! Wow.
And in fact, he was. It just so happened that he was ill, so he was sick. So they pulled him out of the field, took him to the base camp, and that's when his guys got hit and overrun. So anyway, we all have PTSD to an extent. My phone just said I'm on low power mode, so I'm going to plug it in. I don't know if that's going to affect this or not.
That's fine.
Okay.
I want to start a new file.
Hang on just